Hello, my name is John, and today we'll be reading the Quotable Paul Johnson. Quotes by Paul Johnson. Paul Johnson is an eminent historian and journalist with a few words of wisdom from a worthy life. The family is essentially a protective force, and not least against the claims of the state. It is an area of private custom as opposed to public law. It is an alternative to the state as a focus of loyalty, and thus a humanizing force in society. Unlike the state, it upholds non-material values, makes them paramount indeed. It repudiates the exclusive claims of realpolitik. The family, in fact, is a gentle ideology in itself, because it is inconceivable without a system of morality based on altruism. The family embraces tradition rather than fashionable dogma. It upholds a balance of rights and responsibilities, and not merely within generations. It insists on respect for the past and concern for the future. The most socially subversive institution of our time is the one-parent family. By cutting the umbilical cord with God, our source of ethical vitality would be gone. Morally, we would become nothing better than a species of fantastically clever monkeys. Our ultimate fate would be too horrible to contemplate, for the truth is that we humans are all Jekyll and Hyde creatures, and the monster within each of us is always striving to take over. What is important in history is not only the events that occur, but the events that obstinately do not occur. The outstanding event of modern times was the failure of religious belief to disappear. For many millions, especially in advanced nations, religion ceased to play much or any part in their lives, and the ways in which the vacuum thus was lost was filled by fascism, Nazism, and communism. By attempts at humanist utopianism, by eugenics or health politics, by the ideologies of sexual liberation, race politics, and environmental politics, form much of the substance of the history of our century. But for many more millions, for the overwhelming majority of the human race, in fact, religion continued to be a huge dimension in their lives. It is a curious fact about human nature that many people actually seem to want to believe in an approaching catastrophe. In the Dark and Middle Ages, indeed right up to the 17th century, religious seers would always collect a substantial following if they predicted the end of the world, especially if they gave a specific date for it. When the date came and went and nothing happened, human credulity did not disappear. It re-emerged promptly when the next persuasive prophet mounted his soapbox. The ecological panic of our times is driven by exactly the same emotional needs. Indeed, is yet another example of how, during the 20th century, the declining religious impulse has been replaced by secular substitutes, which are often far more irrational and destructive. Nothing appeals to intellectuals more than the feeling that they represent the people. Nothing, as a rule, is further from the truth. The study of history is a powerful antidote to contemporary arrogance. It is humbling to discover how many of our glib assumptions, which seem to us novel and plausible, have been tested before, not once, but many times and in innumerable guises, and discovered to be, at great human cost, wholly false. The left is very clever at relabeling to produce an inversion of reality, as their categorization of fascism shows. In the West, it is now recognized, even among the socialist intelligentsia, that Soviet Russia is a failure, and they want to distance themselves from it. What easier way to do it than by labeling those identified with the failure as conservatives and the right? By early 1933, the two largest and strongest of Europe were firmly in the grip of totalitarian regimes, which preached and practiced and indeed embodied moral relativism with all its horrifying potentialities. Throughout these years, the power of the state to do evil expanded with awesome speed. The more I study history, the more convinced I am that what happens is influenced as much by the willpower of key individuals as by the underlying presence of collective forces. Throughout history, the attachment of even the humblest people to their freedom, above all their freedom to earn their livings how and where they please, has come as an unpleasant shock to condescending ideologues. We need not suppose that the exercise of freedom is bought at the expense of any deserving class or interest, only of those with the itch to tyrannize. Liberal fascism. It is constituted not so much by liberals themselves as by the well-organized and increasingly aggressive pressure groups liberal triumphalism has spawned. Its two most dangerous manifestations are the race relations industry and the homosexual lobby, though there is a growing number of other objectionable groups. What worries me is not so much the demands of these liberal fascists as the willingness of the rich and powerful, both people and institutions, to bow to them. There is a stench of cowardice in the air, as in the original fascist heyday of the 30s. Early socialists were uplifted by tremendous hopes of ideal societies just around the corner. They delighted in thoughts of communes and Owenite towns, and later of model cooperatives, kibbutzim, public ownership, national investment boards, ideal council housing, waving cornfields, and ballet in the evening. All that has now vanished, with the discrediting alike of Soviet and Chinese communism on the one hand, and of social democratic nationalization on the other. No one now believes in these utopias, and communal experiments are at best a minority taste. So all that remains is the discontent with existing society, which has filled the vacuum left by the collapse of idealistic solutions, and now dominates the minds of the middle-class left almost to the exclusion of anything else. They have developed a positive taste for misery-mongering and expect the rest of us to share it. The argument that the West was somehow to blame for world poverty was itself a Western invention. Like decolonization, it was a product of guilt, the prime dissolvent of order and justice. The evil of competition, as he saw it, which destroys man's inborn communal sense and encourages all his most evil traits, including his desire to exploit others, led Rousseau to distrust private property as a source of social crime. From Paul Johnson, Intellectuals. Almost all intellectuals profess to love humanity and be working for its improvement and happiness. But it is the idea of humanity they love rather than the actual individuals who compose it. They love humanity in general rather than men and women in particular. Loving humanity as an idea, they can then produce solutions as ideas. Therein lies the danger, for when people conflict with the solution as idea, they are first ignored or dismissed as unrepresentative, and then when they continue to obstruct the idea, they are treated with growing hostility and categorized as enemies of humanity in general. The Second World War took place not so much because no one won the first, but because the Versailles Treaty did not acknowledge this truth. If you depart from moral absolutes, you go into a bottomless pit. Communism and Nazism were catastrophic evils which both derive from moral relativism. Their differences were minor compared to their similarities. The urge to distribute wealth equally, and still more the belief that it can be brought about by political action, is the most dangerous of all popular emotions. It is the legitimization of envy, of all the deadly sins, and one which a stable society based on consensus should fear the most. The monster state is a source of many evils, but it is, above all, an engine of envy. In the last generation, with public Christianity and headlong retreat, we have caught our first distant view of a de-Christianized world, and it is not encouraging. Global warming, like Marxism, is a political theory of actions demanding compliance with its rules. If anti-Semitism is a variety of racism, it is the most peculiar variety with many unique characteristics. In my view as a historian, it is so peculiar that it deserves to be placed in a quite different category. I would call it an intellectual disease, a disease of the mind, extremely infectious and massively destructive. For me, this is the vital litmus test. No intellectual society can flourish where a Jew feels even slightly uneasy. A Stalin functionary admitted innocent people were arrested, naturally. Otherwise, no one would be frightened. If people were arrested only for specific misdemeanors, all the others would feel safe and so become ripe for treason. Lenin's humanitarianism was a very abstract passion. It embraced humanity in general, but he seems to have had little love for, even interest in, humanity in particular. He saw the people with whom he dealt, his comrades, not as individuals, but as receptacles for his ideas. On that basis and no other they were judged. He judged man not by their moral qualities, but by their views, or rather the degree to which they accepted his. Marxism, Freudianism, global warming, these are proof of which history offers so many examples that people can be suckers on a grand scale. To their fanatical followers, they are a substitute for religion. Global warming in particular is a creed, a faith, a dogma that has little to do with science. Every good historian is almost by definition a revisionist. He looks at the accepted view of a particular historic episode or period with a very critical eye. My grandfather used to say, "Learn to like art, music, and literature deeply and passionately. They will be your friends when things are bad." It is true. At this time of year, when days are short and dark and one hardly dares to open the newspapers, I turn not vainly either to the great creators of the past for distraction, solace, and help. This video is a production of the School of the White Crane. My name is John Brooker. You can reach me by commentary on this video or by my Gmail listed here. Please share this video with friends and family and on social media. May God richly bless you.